Good day everyone, so actions speak louder than words, and that is what I want to investigate in today's video. So rather than look at Genshin Impact the game from the perspective of what we want as players, let's just look at it from the perspective of what Hoyo has been doing in the game. So recently they've added quite a bit of quality of life changes, so notably some things like the daily commission system, the auto artifact system that they've added. They've also added other things like making the ascension quest a lot easier, reducing the boss difficulties for the lower AR levels, and one of the things that all of these systems have in common is that they're geared towards the new players. You see, someone that has 100%ed many of the regions don't really need the fancy daily commission system, but obviously for the 9-year-olds that don't even know what the word commission means, if they just see a big fancy little present on their screen giving them primo gems, they understand that it is good. And I think that's really what Hoyo is doing. I think they're literally trying to simplify it and give people as much primo gems without them even knowing what is even really happening. It's the same with the artifact systems. You've got a bunch of Chinese 9-year-olds running with a Huta on a defense circlet because they're scared that the character will die because she loses health, and lo and behold, Hoyo adds in a system to try and help them, rather than adding a system for us as endgame players that want to switch between different artifact loadouts. Once again, the focus is on making the life as easy as possible for these new players. We've seen it with the nerfing of enemies. Look, if there's one thing that Hoyo loves is TCG updates and nerfing boss enemies. There's not a patch that has gone by since 2.1 where we haven't had one or two enemies being nerfed. There's always an enemy, whether it's a Kairagi, whether it's a boss, and you always note that a lot of these nerfs seem to be targeted towards the world level 3 to 5, which is where I think a lot of people stop playing Genshin Impact. You see, why do people stop playing? Why do they find these bosses difficult? Well, the answer is not that because they don't know that there are artifacts or builds or all these things. It's just because as a player, if you want to progress, you need to level up your characters, and unfortunately the game itself gatekeeps you very hard from doing that through the resin system, and it's not like you can accumulate 2,400 resin like in Honkai Star Rail. So this is the big problem. You've got an old gacha system that's supposed to be about gatekeeping and FOMO literally being, I think, the big reason why a lot of players get frustrated with the new game, which then ends up with Hoyo giving a disproportionate focus to the new game just so that they can retain some of these players. And from a business decision perspective, it makes a lot of sense. Why do I need you F2P players that just scream and shout Xiangling Bennett Qingshu, and you've never even paid like a cent in the last 3 years, when I can get potentially a new player that just is going to buy one gun, new skin, or a little bit of a welcome here or there? Do you understand my point? Genshin itself needs to churn lots and lots of new players, and this is something that I've realized when I looked at my channel. If you look at my videos and stuff, you'll realize that we've got about 8,000 subscribers, of which 7,000 are literally not even playing the game anymore. They're not even watching the videos anymore. How did I get these subscribers? Well, it's very simple. It wasn't because of a massive breakdown of artifacts or build guides or showing you how to beat the abyss as F2P as possible. It was literally just me running around with a slime balloon and beating up the slime balloon with Kokomi. That's it, 800k views right there. Or another video with literally Klee getting hurt, Kokomi puts down the jellyfish, Klee gets back up to a full health, Klee beats up the enemy. That level of casual engagement during like the COVID pandemic just made a lot of casual players just like flood towards this channel, and that is really what the success is behind the channel. Everything else, like an in-depth GC sim guide to Nilo Bloom teams and aura management and the deep discussions that we can have about that, no one really cares. And that is the big point of all of this. People genuinely don't care about the endgame. The true endgame in Genshin Impact is getting 100% for all the regions. It is doing all the character quests. It is kitting out your Serenity pod, and it is beating up the TCG. The Spiral Abyss really is not even a practical consideration from that perspective. And it now really makes sense when you start tying all of this together. Why give you more rewards, give you an artifact loadout system when the game itself is not even geared towards those things? Because if I give you a lots of like free characters to help keep up with the ever-changing meta, or I give you artifact loadouts, then it means that the quality of life changes are geared by default towards an endgame focus, and that is a big problem for Hoyo, because with an endgame focus, people are gonna optimize the fun out of the game. They're gonna optimize completely which are the best characters which you should be pulling for, and that is a bad business strategy for Hoyo, because unfortunately, if everyone agrees that Klee is pretty bad, or like if you take Kokomi and the first time that she came out, when everyone decided that Kokomi was bad, no one spent on the character. The revenue charts are there, they're kind of obvious on it, and that's also why Hoyo has never even bothered to give us any decent Kokomi content after her release. It's kind of sad to me, but that's just how the game works, and you can see why Hoyo made the decision to keep the game as casual as possible. Now, I don't agree with this, because I do think that by providing a lot of different varieties of endgame combat modes that you could have, and then tying these together with TCG into a total Primogem count that is split between all the endgame activities, you can encourage people to play like the game. So if someone is really afraid of the Spiral Abyss, then they can go and play TCG and they can still get their quota of 600 Primogems per 2 weeks. If you have that shared Primogem count shared between all the different game modes, then if anything, you would be able to encourage like player diversity, and you can then tune your end game modes. Let's say there's a roguelike mode or some sort of equivalent of a simulated universe in Genshin, where you can tune the stage and the buff effects to favor the characters that you are currently selling. And that is just like a much more mature way of going about it. You still keep the casual side, you give people the options, and then ultimately people can still then have enough content that justifies all of these hours of grinding and building up their characters. And that is just how I think Hoyo should have done it. The way Honkai Star Rail implements it, even from the beginning for players starting out like me with a brand new account, means that I can get into the simulated universe, I can quickly start getting into that end game loop without losing out on too much. But the problem is with Genshin is that they're so stingy with how the early game was set up and like gatekeeping you with resin that you can understand why people are frustrated. And I think that's just a sad part of it. I also think that another thing Genshin really is trying to do is to remove a lot of the drudge of the overworld with the new characters that are coming out. Like with Shen Yun, you can literally fly around for a short bit. With Farina, you can infinitely walk on water, which is really useful because there's a lot of waterlogged regions in Genshin. There are lots of areas that effectively inhibit your exploration progress if you don't have Mona or Ayaka to help get across there. So I think that characters like Farina would definitely meant to kind of bridge that gap, make things easier for new players, of course at the cost of literally shafting characters like Mona and Kokomi in the process, as well as characters like Beta with the swimming passive and all that. But you get the idea. I think Hoyo has certainly said that the old products have had their life cycle. We're going to push out new products, new characters are going to come out. They've got a 6-week half-life, and thereafter we're just going to keep on pushing new characters and new ways of playing in the overworld, and that is the casualness summed up. There is no real end game, and I think it's sad that that's the decision that Hoyo has made, but there is a better way to still manage that. And so, in other words, there's a better way to manage your new players while still retaining your old players. And I think it's just a shame that Hoyo has not seen it. So from my perspective, I get where Hoyo is coming from, but I do think that it's a very scumbag move. And the reason I say this, and this is something that no casual player can ever refute, is the fact that when we started the game, it was definitely geared towards being a hardcore gacha that was all meant about improving your characters for combat. The amount of Hypostasis Symphony, Vagabond, the Omniu Chamber, all of these combat events that were really focused on you building up your characters properly were all designed from the beginning to appease to that combat side, and Hoyo has made like a 180-degree turn on that, which just means that our initial impressions from playing the game and how the game has currently evolved is just so fundamentally different. And I think Hoyo, at the very least, if they're not going to give us rewards or they're not going to give us anything, should at least apologize for that. They should apologize for changing the game's direction in a way that ultimately shafted a lot of the players that initially helped them become the company that they are. But that is just my opinion. Look, if we look at the balance of evidence, it's clear that Genshin is not meant to have an endgame. It's meant to be a fluff piece, but that you enjoy. Unfortunately, I think some of the fundamental designs in the early game that they've implemented is precisely the reason that they're struggling to retain new players, and the artificial focus on that just means that as long-term players, we are just going to keep on feeling neglected. And like I said in a previous video, the only way you can respond is not by giving more negative publicity, because that's just going to mean more people are going to see that there is something like Genshin Impact out there, but rather to just slowly keep on playing, don't spend, bleed them out on server cost, and just show a general apathy towards their social media accounts, all the things that they post, because if there's one thing that Hoyo cannot counter is absolute indifference. Hate, they can always use towards against you, but apathy is something that will bleed them out in the long term, and I think it's the only strategy that can get through to them. Alright, a bit of a longer video than usual. Hopefully you've enjoyed, and thanks for watching.